couple of minutes to get logged on and join us, and then we'll start. So please bear with us. Cheng-Zi, please could you mute your microphone? And to all presenters, please could you make sure your microphones are muted before we go live? Thank you. So I think we'll make a start. Hello everyone, many thanks for joining this third webinar in the series on Source to Sea. My name is Gareth Lloyd and I work for the UNEP-DHI partnership, and we're a United Nations Environment Collaboration Centre focused on freshwater and environmental issues. It's my job to be your facilitator of this webinar today. Maya is going to be, or is taking a well-earned break, but I'm pleased to have my good colleague Cheng-Zi Chu with us, and Cheng-Zi, also of UNEP-DHI, will be providing the technical backstopping. The Source to Sea webinar series aims to highlight the importance of understanding the connections needed to achieve SDG 6 on freshwater and SDG 14 on oceans. And what we're basically sharing with you here and discussing with you is the value of integrating efforts in these freshwater and saltwater areas to reduce negative impacts and maximize the potential benefits. And what we've done in the series is we've gathered together a number of expert presenters, and they're going to be sharing their experiences with you using some selected case stories occasionally to exemplify the application of approaches for specific issues or addressing specific issues. And this is a general theme throughout the series, those with the experts. The series is developed in collaboration with UN Environment, CIWI, and the UNDP Water Governance Facility and the Action Platform for Source to Sea Management. In the previous two webinars, we set the scene through introducing key concepts as well as the Sustainable Development Goals and their linkages. We also made a start on drilling down into some of the policy and management interactions by looking at some of those interesting but also disturbing experiences of dealing with land-based sources of marine pollution last time around. If you didn't have a chance to catch those earlier webinars, I'd strongly encourage you to take a look. The recordings are available online, and I'll give you the links shortly. Today, I'm very pleased to say that we have another 4 experts with us who are going to be sharing their knowledge and experiences. Kicking off proceedings, we will have Case from Deltaris and also of the Delta Alliance, and he will be using some details from a recent assessment to tell us exactly why deltas are of particular importance, not least in terms of people and pressures. Next up, we have Ola of UN Environment. Ola will be taking us into the details of an ongoing project aimed at capacity building to improve spatial planning in Vietnam. Here we're going to see what they're up to and how they're trying to address a number of challenges, some of which Case will have highlighted earlier in his presentation. Following on from Ola, we have Sana of DHI. Sana is going to be sharing her experiences related to infrastructure planning and more particularly in terms of the location of harbours at or near river mouths. And she'll be telling us how upstream solutions can end up in downstream problems, but more about that one shortly. After Sana, and again focusing on solutions, we have Amani from FAO, and Amani will be presenting on how food security and nutrition can be improved from through a source-to-sea approach. Next, after that, we're going to have Birgitta from SIWI and the platform, who will be, well, her role will be to both bring things together and round things off by giving us some of the broader source-to-sea reflections taken from the presentations, or inspired by the presentations, I should probably say. Each presentation is going to take about 10 minutes, and as usual we'll allow for 1 to 2 questions immediately after each presentation, just to pick up on anything and to break things up a little. We'll also be allowing some space for additional questions at the end from you, the participants. And as usual, or if you haven't joined us before, in the panel on the right of your screen, you may need to extend it. You should be able to see a box for submitting questions somewhere down that panel there. So we'd encourage you to please make good use of that. It would be a big help if you could identify who your question is for, and also to keep your questions as brief and to the point as possible. And that way it will help us cover more ground in the time that we have available. Without further ado, I'd like to ask Cheng Zi to pass control of the presentation over to Case so he can begin. Case, as soon as we can see your presentation and I can hear your voice, then I will let you know you're good to go.
Okay, here I am.
Yeah, if you can put it into, if you can just click on your presentation, and then we won't see the icons at the bottom of the screen. Yeah, we can hear your voice, so please feel free to plow on whenever you're ready. Thanks.
Thank you very much for having this opportunity to tell something about deltas. It's in this series about source to sea, the continuum, and in the middle, where the rivers meet the sea, there are those deltas. And the institute I work on, Deltaris in the Netherlands, and also the Alliance on deltas, the Delta Alliance, they work in this intermediate area of deltas. In this continuum, it's not only about physical flows that are interrelated to each other, it's also about upstream land use management, it's about governance upstream and downstream, it's about influences coming from the sea, and all in between the rapid urbanization and economic developments, which also contribute to pressures next to the predicted climate change impact. What we did as a Delta Alliance, we are a community of quite some deltas, and we did a comparative assessment of a number of those. Here you see some reasons why those deltas are important. Well, they are valuable, they are also vulnerable, and pressures are increasing. Now the interesting thing is this deadline.
Yeah, sorry to hop in there. Yeah, if you click on your presentation, and then your icons will disappear. In case, I don't know if you have the possibility to make any small adjustments to your audio, that would make it a little bit clearer, but that would be a help. If not, then please, it's good enough, we can hear you. Thanks.
Is this better? Maybe?
Yeah, that's a little bit better, thanks.
I'll do my best. Thank you. Well, deltas. Urbanizing deltas, they are at the heart of this continuum from source to sea. Many things happen. The rapid economic development and urbanization are be seen all around the globe. It has economic development and also the ecological conditions, they are under pressure and at the same time precious resources. There are perspectives that are of use to put urbanizing deltas also in the new urban agenda. You see a number of them mentioned here. The Delta Alliance, it has a mission to help to build and improve resilience of those deltas by sharing knowledge, by identifying a common knowledge agenda, to see if we can jointly learn from each other and develop knowledge and also build capacity to help it implemented in possible measures to increase resilience. The Delta Alliance is at the moment a membership of some 16 deltas in different continents across the globe. The Delta Alliance is a knowledge-driven network where much knowledge is being shared, and we think it's worthwhile to reach out with this knowledge to also the policy arena. The Delta Coalition is a group of countries with ministers who act in the global urban agendas of disaster risk reduction, of climate, of the new urban agenda and the SDGs. And we think it's a good tandem to have them both connected. The comparative assessment took place in some 14 deltas, and of course a report and many background documents are available on the website of the Delta Alliance. These are the deltas that we have worked in Africa, Asia, Europe, North America and also South America. We have many teams worked on, and maybe some of the audience are part of these teams, but they can be approached for further details if so needed. We offered an approach to make this assessment, having the drivers respond impact stated pressure methodology, which is well known, and we connected that to the layers approach used in spatial development, the base layer, networks, and occupation layer. This framework for assessment, as you see, has different angles to look at. The base layer has much to do with natural resources. The network layer has much to do with technological development and infrastructure. And occupation layer has much to do with land and water use. Of course, the governance of those different dimensions are important to take note of, and they cover different aspects of people, public and private sector interest. We offer this framework for those assessments to those different deltas who did those assessments themselves from within their own community of knowledge-driven institutes. And they addressed a number of issues like being presented here in this slide, many different aspects which were covered with different indicators so as to have a comparative methodology to compare the outcome of this assessment among those different deltas. As to learn from each other and to bring items under discussion to see if we can see areas of common interest to develop further knowledge, or areas where you may have a dispute on different approaches or different cultural settings or different governance settings. What we did, this is a simple green, orange, red signal tablet, which makes a basis for some kind of a comparison to speak to each other. We also indicated how the resilience and sustainability of those deltas are expected to develop under current and moderate and more extreme scenarios for projected climate change impacts. And the more pressure that occurs, the more sensitive on the longer term settings may be. Maybe they relate to governance, but they may also relate to changes in the physical system. Many deltas, they have to cope with the same issues, but of course per delta the actions may be very different. Differences between demands and supply for water, it's also about sediments, it's about land and water use. There often is an imbalance, and that's an area where we can learn from each other how to cope with that, how to make physical arrangements, but also how to deal with possible improvements in governance setting and addressing multi-stakeholder approaches. Infrastructure development, that's also an issue in many of those deltas, and it should be upgraded up to climate-proof conditions, and also disaster risk reduction is part of that arena. That's through delta processes in those areas where rapid urbanization is dominant, and also demographic aspects play a role. in this destruction of natural delta processes, which again hampers the services they could deliver. Governance, and including in that possible financing mechanisms to implement measures, they also are an invitation to seek for solutions which are of common interest. This is the type of overviews that you then can gather from these assessments, also where research gaps and knowledge exchange are most promising for inter-delta learning processes. And you see over those deltas the different issue may differ a bit, but there are many areas of common interest. There's much more information available also in some next slides, but I will leave it with this here. And you can look at the website document for much more information. We believe this is a good element in adding to this source to sea continuum to look specifically on those rapidly urbanizing deltas as an intermediate to improve governance, to improve at some moments the natural system by interventions from which we can look around and learn from each other and share experiences with us. Thank you for your attention.
And many thanks for that, Kees. Please don't mute your microphone just yet. I think we'll have a quick question. But before I go into the question, a small, well, a rather large apology for the sound issues I think some of you were experiencing there. We did have a technical test just prior to the call, but for some reason it crept in, that issue crept in just afterwards. Don't worry, we'll check the recording after this, and if need be, we will get together with Kees and just re-record that section and insert it into the recording, so apologies for that. A quick question to you, Kees. The Delta Alliance, is it open to everyone? And someone has a specific question, nice easy one. Why isn't India included?
The Delta Alliance, yes, it's open for everyone. Essentially, we work with communities which work together in river basins and their deltas, so not country-wise, but river basin delta-wise. And it's open for everyone, and India Delta is very much welcome to be part of this alliance. The details for doing so, they are on the website, and you can also approach me myself.
Right, and the reason for India or Nigeria or other countries not being included is that they haven't engaged or applied directly.
What I do recognize in several countries is that deltas are seen as only a very small part of their country surface area. Bangladesh, obvious, delta is a bigger part of their country policies related to water. Like the Netherlands, where I come from, is one delta, the country is one delta. But in India, I can imagine that the country is so big that deltas are only seen as a minor part of their national policies.
Right, many thanks for that, Kees. If I could ask you to just mute your microphone, and if I could ask Cheng Zi to please pass the presentation over to Ola. And Ola, when yes, we can see your presentation. We can't hear you yet.
Yeah, I'm now unmuted.
Yes, now we can hear you. If you just click inside the presentation, the icons at the bottom of your screen have now disappeared. Excellent, thanks. Ola, you're ready to go whenever you like. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Garrett, and thank you to the organizers, and thank you to everyone listening into the webinar. So my name is Ole Vestergaard. I work with the UN Environment, Marine and Coastal Ecosystems branch, and I'm based in Nairobi. And I will speak a little bit about a pilot project we're doing in the lower Mekong Delta on coastal planning. And certainly some of the issues that we have just heard in the previous presentation is very relevant here, and I think this little case study will give you some practical sort of experiences on how we're dealing with these issues. The project is implemented jointly with the GIZ Vietnam program and Ministry of Environment. And And as I said, it's a small pilot project aiming to build capacity of government and planners in the lower Mekong Delta. And just to give you an idea where we are, top right we have the sort of whole Mekong watershed, and if you look top bottom right, there's a snapshot of the coastal provinces of the Mekong. And then to the left we have a shot of the Kamau province, which is the main focus of our exercise. It's at the lower south of the whole Mekong. And what characterizes the whole Mekong Delta is that it has a very high population pressure and high social vulnerability. It has intensive agriculture, including rice production and shrimp farming. And then the whole issue of water is a key one. It has high water demand, while at the same time it can face big scarcity. Recent years has been impacted by drought, and upcoming is impacts of severe hydropower development way upstream and in sort of above upstream countries like Laos and Cambodia. Then we have various pressures on the ecosystems and habitats, notably the mangrove at the coastline. And all this is impacted by the increasing climate effects, storm surges, coastal erosion, saltwater intrusion coming into the irrigation areas. And overall, this combined cumulative effect of different human uses erodes the natural resilience of the Mekong Delta. So what we're doing in this project, we're working with the Ministry of Environment, as well as the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, to help a planning exercise that can lay the ground for future more integrated management of the Delta. So what we're doing, the project scope is really to introduce ecosystem-based coastal spatial planning principles to support coastal management. We are helping the government develop guidelines for a new integrated coastal management policy that was adopted 2 years ago, and then we're trying to take the lessons from this pilot project and bring them to other provinces in Vietnam, to neighbor countries, and globally. And the partners is a range of agencies. I mentioned UNEP-DHI Vietnam, local universities, UNEP-DHI, and importantly the local provincial people committee and the departments of the ministries are involved. And really what we're trying to do is see how ecosystem-based management as an approach can be adopted through spatial planning, how traditional spatial planning can integrate ecosystem considerations, what are effective institutional sort of collaboration for integrated management, how can we better link land use and sea use planning, and then more focused we're looking at how we can fill certain capacity gaps of the provinces to implement future integrated coastal management plans, and again what lessons we can draw from this to help the government implement the new national policy. From the environment side, a key sort of objective is to apply a framework we developed on ecosystem-based management. So this here to the left you have a guide, an introduction guide to ecosystem-based management, and it outlines a framework for planning, and it's really to introduce what are the key principles of ecosystem-based management and help national planners adopt these principles. It has 3 main elements: visioning, planning, and implementation. And for this pilot project, we really try to drill into the first step of the process, like visioning, and I'll come back to that in a second. But really to try to see how can you help the process by being thoughtful in the beginning and try to really bring sectors together and identify some key issues. Just briefly, a key element of ecosystem-based management relates to understanding the joint or cumulative effects of different uses. One thing is to have impact of overfishing. If you combine that with overfishing and impact from agriculture, like runoff and pollution, and if you thirdly develop coastal areas, and then those combined effects have a very severe combined knock-on effect of the ecosystems. And this is one of the principles we are pursuing in this project. So we're working with about 35 planners from 4 coastal provinces in a sort of technical assistance process. We help them take stock of the current environment and the conditions, what relevant policies and frameworks are in place. what various sector planning processes are already up and running, how do we connect existing land use plan to a coastal planning process, and what existing information are there and what gaps are there we need to fill. In the process, we have introduced a number of planning tools, from strategic environmental assessments to how you can measure the compatibility of different uses, how you can make very deeper stakeholder analysis, and then there's specific zoning tools and shoreline management. I will not be dealing with all these in this presentation. I will come back to the visioning part after initially having mapped the area we are looking at. For instance, the key forest types, mangroves in different sections. Having mapped different physical characteristics like here, waterways and roads. You can see it's a very complex system, and it's a very intensively used agricultural system with irrigation channels and so forth. And also mapping various current uses, resource uses from forest exploitation and so forth. That's really to develop the initial overview of what we're dealing with. And in some of the trainings we have helped the planners really discuss across the different sectors what are the different uses they're seeing, and try to map that. Try to map where are the community areas and so forth. And then in terms of bringing that into a planning process, the key sort of overarching idea of ecosystem management is partly to have an organized cyclic approach where you will set up a vision, you will have your planning process that you start implement. And then as time goes and you start to see an effect or things are changing, you may need to revisit the process. So you may, another cycling, you might adapt your key goals, you might have met certain criteria and can move on and so forth. And this visioning element is what we call vision-based development. It sets the process aside from the more traditional planning where you normally will identify the key drivers and the problems, and it's kind of a problem-based approach. Here we kind of encourage that people take a step back and look at the bigger vision. Where do they want to go and how do they get there? Across different sectors. So bring different sectors together. In this case, agriculture, water sectors, conservation sectors, social, population agencies and so forth. Come together and try to identify what would the vision look like. And I've given some examples there. In this Kamau province, for instance, by one vision could be by 2035, we want the province are secure. They have enjoying sustainable development in harmony with environmental and ecological resources. The next step is then to make that more operational by translating the vision into goals and strategies. What are the different goals, often based per sector, because when we get to the implementation, often it will happen in a sector approach. So what does a vision mean for the environment? What does it mean for local economic development? What does it mean for health and safety? What does it mean for water, sanitation, and so forth? So for each of those goals, you can then identify specific problems, and you can kind of drill into the issues.
2 minutes, please, Ola.
Yep. So we continue the exercise by start to layer different uses, as you noted here, and we try to map. We start to make some suggestions on where can different uses fit into. This is a coastline, a snapshot of a coastline. How could different uses work together, or kind of without overstepping different interests? We can calculate different compatibility between different uses. Some areas will be conflicting each other, but in other cases, some sectors can actually coexist with each other, and you can translate that into different zoning classes, and you can calculate through different statistical methods, different criteria for which kind of strategies you want to promote. If you want to have increased livelihood, if you want to have reduced, or you emphasize disaster risk reduction and so forth, you can kind of make some semi-quantitative informed decisions and priority setting on different strategies to meet your goals and your vision. And so just very briefly at the end here, in this case, the planners in these provinces had identified a number of strategies that they want to pursue: improve coastal community and shoreline protection, develop human and social resources and capacity for management, and so forth. So this is where we are at now, and we have got a lot of good feedback and taking this approach, and to derive a more integrated understanding across the sectors. And now the planners are working on translating this into some specific zoning plans that they can take to further stakeholder consultation and so forth. Lastly, just to mention that the process also has assisted the Ministry of Environment and the Vietnam administration foresees to develop guidelines for the new national policy on STM, and we are looking to explore and use some of these lessons into our wider regional system-based management work. I think I'll end it here and take any questions, and thank you.
And many thanks to you as well, Ola. There were quite a few acronyms there, and I think you did a good job of saying them out in full, but one that cropped up a few times, of course, was ecosystem-based adaptation. And I know this is a big thing for UN Environment. Would you like to say just quickly a few words about exactly what that is and where people can learn more?
Okay, exactly what it is in a few words is a challenge, but it's, as I mentioned, it's about linking a number of principles that looks at how ecosystem plays a role in the wider management. So, for instance, as I mentioned, community impacts. It's about looking across governance boundaries and look at linkages between ecosystems, upstream, downstreams. One key aspect is a concept called ecosystem service valuation, where you try to put a value on your ecosystem service, not only in really, monetary terms, but also other values. It's about looking at really multiple planning across different sector objectives and so forth. That's some of the key elements. And when we talk about ecosystem adaptation, it's really looking at using natural infrastructure for climate change adaptation. So, for instance, in this case, making sure that the mangrove belt along the coastline is as strong and rich and can better sustain storm surges and erosion, for instance. And there are several different other principles. If you want to learn more about it, your environment has done this guide, introduction guide and planning framework for ecosystem-based management. In our website, we have a number of resources. Additionally, I can explain what it is.
Many thanks for that, Ola. Cheng-Zi, could I ask you to pass the presentation on to Sana? Could I ask Ola to please mute his microphone? And Sana, whenever you're up and ready, I'll let you know. Just waiting for you to accept the presentation.
Yeah.
We can hear you now. Can't see your presentation yet. I guess it's on its way.
Yes, it's on its way.
Right. Sana, just before you go on, I recall that you have a short video or something in your presentation. Would you like to say a few words just about that? Thanks. Feel free to start whenever you're ready, Sana. Sorry.
Yes, sure. Thank you very much, Gareth, for facilitating this, and thank you for UNEP-DHI for hosting this webinar. My name is Sana Niemann. I'm from DHI, from the Coastal and Estuarine Department. I work with sediment flows in my daily work. This presentation will not be so much about governance, but it will be about planning for physical processes. So the purpose with this this presentation is maybe to shed some light on how the upstream projects can cause some downstream problems. I've chosen to talk about harbors today. Harbors are important infrastructures, and they are important for many people's lives. They are nodal points where the sea and the land meet, and where fish are efficiently and safely landed. So many people make their living in harbors or from harbors, and are as such vital for many towns, smaller or larger. Harbors are often placed in river mouths because they this is where you can ease the connection between the land transportation, or the transportation in rivers and from the sea. The aim with this presentation is to highlight the importance of sediment flows in a source-to-sea system, and I'll show some examples of how interactions with the sediment flow system has some downstream effects in the river and the coastal environment when human actions intervene with this. Let's see. Oh, other way. Okay, so first just a little bit about the basic processes. The basic processes for transporting the sediment in the river and coastal environment are basically governed by the currents in the rivers and at the sea, and the waves. In the rivers, the currents pick up the sediment from the river bottom and transport the sediment in the current in the flow direction. The coarser sediment, such as sand or gravel, may roll or jump along the bed, whereas the finer sediment is transported with the water. Near the sea, this is also influenced by the tidal flow, which causes reversing flow pattern. Along the beaches at the coast, wave breaking, as you see in the lower image here to the left, wave breaking drive a current, and this current could drive sediments along the coast. This is what we call a littoral drift or littoral current. Where these forces change, such as in the river delta, where the river meets the sea, the forces for this sediment transport changes, and this can cause deposition or erosion. The changes to water depths, riverbanks or shorelines due to this deposition or erosion is what we call morphology or morphological changes. So this is just briefly about the basic processes. Now there are many more processes which may contribute to the sediment balance. Some of these are influenced by human actions, such as irrigation, dams, power plants, which may reduce the water flows, sand mining, which can extract the sediment out of the rivers, land reclamations can change the flows, and there is subsidence, lowering of the land, or sea level rise. All of these can change the erosion deposition in the river coastal system. UN's development goals, such as the SDG 6, dealing with freshwater, and SDG 14, dealing with the oceans, may potentially lead to many projects which can influence the sediment transport in the rivers and at the coast. In a source-to-sea perspective, it's clear that this requires, first of all, a good understanding of the physical environment, and second, integrated management in the river and coastal areas to avoid some unintended problems. Some of these unintended problems was seen in Sri Lanka, where river sand mining was, and to my knowledge still is going on. River mining of sediments reduce the sediment concentrations in the rivers, and that means that the supply of sediment to the coast reduces. As such, the human interactions in the rivers are directly linked to consequences, unintended consequences on the coast. Riverbanks eroded, and the shorelines downstream of the rivers, as you can see on the right, lower right image here, can cause severe coastal erosion. Some solutions were put in place to relieve this erosion. Instead of the traditional solution of adding stone protection to the coast, a layout which allowed access to the sea was used in this case shown here. Now I'll move on to talk about the harbors, which are structures which are interfering with the sediment budget. The rate of the sediment flows from the rivers and along the coasts are not always recognized before human interventions actually interfere with this sediment balance. I have a video moving here, and I'll just briefly talk a little bit about it. Structures in the physical environment has the implication, several implications on the sediment flows. They may physically block the sediment flows, or they may alter the currents or waves if it's near the sea. Potentially, the sediment may accumulate, as you see here in the video, where a lot of huge sediment has accumulated upstream this port. Start it again, and then it eventually accumulation is so large that the sediment actually enters in the enters the port. This causes this reduces the depth, of course, in the river basins and constitutes a risk for navigation. Sedimentation can be held off by dredging, but this cost comes at a high maintenance budget, and in reality it often restricts the vessel size the ports can accommodate. So upstream projects involving changes to the sediment flows are then important for these downstream ports in the rivers or in the at the coast. While the sediment accumulates upstream of the port, it may lack downstream, as this video here shows. The video shows a numerical prediction of how the shoreline in the upper part of the image here is actually retreating after the port was constructed and blocks the supply of sediment. The capacity of the currents and the waves to mobilize the sediment is unaltered even if the sediment supply is reduced, and then the sediment is picked up from the beaches and taken away from the beaches, so retreating the shoreline. Different protection schemes can be embedded and tested by such numerical models as shown here. The port layout, in particular the design of these outer breakwaters here, influence the rates and the areas of the sedimentation in the port, and also determines whether the sediment can be carried around these port structures to the downstream coast to also relieve the erosion there. It's not always possible to build such or plan for such ports which can't avoid port sedimentation or coastal erosion, but sometimes it can the layout can be optimized to reduce the risks for unfavorable sedimentation and relieve the pressure on the downstream coasts.
2 minutes, please, Sanna.
Yeah, thank you. In Angola, it's another example where a large port was or is still in the planning stage, but this example also shows well how a port may cause some downstream impacts on the port and the coast. The port was planned here in the bay, just where the River Dande comes out. The port is a large town trying to which aims at relieving the pressure on the other ports in Angola. So see it here to the right. Prior to the planned port, prior to implementation of the port, or the present situation, the bay is almost in the Bay of Dande and the upstream bay is almost in equilibrium with the sediment supply from around these headlands and the prevailing waves. In the future, the port structures will block the sediment transport coming from south along the coast, so around this headland, and also the sediments from the coming out of the river. When no supply of sediment is carried on to the upstream coasts, erosion is unavoidable. Erosion of approximately 80,000 cubic meters per year is predicted. When the port structures block the sediment coming from the rivers, it will sediment, the course of sediments will sediment out, deposit right where the river meets the sea, and if not removed, this can cause a flood risk in the upstream parts of the river. The solution may be to actually dredge the sediment from this river outlet and add it to the shoreline as coastal protection. Another option is, of course, to implement a coastal protection scheme here along the coast to prevent the erosion. Another thing which was investigated was port sedimentation here.
Sorry, Sanna, could you please round up now?
Yes, I can.
Thanks.
Sure. In this case, the fine sediments will be moved southwards with the Angola current, and the port sedimentation was approximately 100,000 cubic meters per year was predicted. But however, it was not concluded to be influenced by the river outflow, since the fine sediments is transported southwards. I'll skip these two. Good. So in conclusion, planning of structures upstream in rivers, which may have influence on the downstream projects or plans, are important to investigate in the planning process, or maybe even prior to the planning process. Knowledge on the physical conditions at the sites cannot be stressed enough, and the response to the changes should be investigated already in the planning process, since it's crucial for successful plans or projects. And then it's every site and every project are specific. Fortunately, there are a lot of knowledge on processes and tools available for studying the impacts of nature, and they are constantly improved by research and new technologies. Thank you.
And many thanks to you too, Sanna. Please hang around, because we're going to be coming back to you, Sanna, just at the end, but as you can hear, I've got one eye on the clock, and I would like to ask Cheng Zi to pass the presentation straight over to Amani to make sure that we have enough time to fit her in, as well as Begida. Yes, we can see your presentation now. Yeah, if you click there, it will go into presentation mode. Perfect. That's it. Great. Oh, you're professional at this, Amani. Please feel free to kick off whenever you're ready. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much for everyone, for my colleague, the panelists, and UNEP-DHI for hosting this webinar. My name is Amani Al-Farra. I'm a water officer from FAO. I'm based in the headquarters Rome. We are foreseen. Sorry, why it doesn't just... water flows, as everyone knows, it connects all the segments in the catchment, upper and lower basement, until it reaches the sea and the ocean. So water literally is the thread that connects all the segments, and that creates challenges to achieve sustainable development, concern how balance need for economic development with measures to ensure social and environmental sustainability. There are linkages between sustainable management of freshwater system, sanitation, land use, urban development, and climate change. With the health of our ocean, that points to the importance of coordinating management efforts to achieve sustainable development goals. The main aim of FAO through its country offices, which headed by FAO representation, is to assist the government to develop policies, program, and projects to achieve food security and reduce hunger and malnutrition, to help develop the agriculture, fishery, forestry sector to use their environmental and natural resources in a sustainable manner. FAO defined food security within 4 pillars: food availability, food access, utilization, which we emphasize nutrition, well-being, and stability. That means it must have access food all the time. Agriculture is the biggest, why source-to-sea approach was important for FAO and become part of our design proposals. Agriculture is the biggest users of water along source-to-sea continuum and has a significant contribution to degraded ecosystem, water flows, quality, with impact on ecosystem and other sectors such as domestic supply. FAO maintain recognized technical expertise and extensive and ongoing project and large scale, multi-country, multi-sectorial program in crop, livestock, forestry, fishery management, and maintains extensive multi-scale database to ensure negotiation and underpinned by quantitative and qualitative evidence with tools that have been developed by FAO such as Aquastat, FAOStat, SOFA, Muscat, and others. The source-to-sea approach resonates the integrated approach that respects characteristics of interdependency between upstream land and water management and downstream quality of delta and coastal area, interconnecting through surface, subsurface flow, rivers, canalized network, and infrastructure routine. Source-to-sea is a dynamic interface between land and ocean, captures key of development environmental challenges, and the source-to-sea increases the pressure in the degraded process of land and water resources. It has international collaboration, concerted land and water management issues, and more. It emphasizes the governance as a key resources flow for sustainable livelihood and ecosystem services across landscape. And have a high flexible through the basin and connect all the segments to each other. So how we foreseen steps towards implementation? By understanding the context in the connected segment of source-to-sea system and develop governance baseline analysis. That will include develop priorities, drivers, pressures, and users for ecosystem status and vulnerable and values. Flows between segment and their values, and define synergies and trade-off between the users, resources, and ecosystem needs. Negotiate and agree overarching governance goal for source-to-sea systems, segments, and sectors with all stakeholders, including building the capacity for genuine participation and building on rather than replacing existing governance framework. Defining management strategy and demonstrate what works. They built on FAO projects such as modernization of irrigation system for multiple users and link these to management at basin scale. Promote sustainable aquaculture and fish consumption. Demonstrate best practices in watershed management in upper reaches or addressing land tenure. Adapt people centered on outcome-oriented approach to guide the process and monitor process of governance and system. Moreover, countries that shared watershed required close international cooperation to consolidate land and water management that assures long-term deliveries across borders. And whenever it's transboundary or international water, it becomes sensitive, and we try to focus on what is wrong and how to resolve this, not on who did it, which that is the air between the countries and make them collaborative more. And we try to integrate all these inputs in a decision support tool that impact that can reflect or evaluate the impact of water policy in the basin from up and downstream across the borders, and reflect the water economy, which bring people together to communicate how we can do trade-offs and other things. In designing proposal within FAO, we try to highlight the component that you foresee by, as we mentioned, develop common base of source to sea management, by establishing baseline studies that cover socioeconomic, biophysical, and governance, and consolidate consensus building process by identifying what are the major elements in that watershed basin. Is it impact of pesticides, use on environmental health? Is it nutrition baseline analysis? Or analyzing land use changes, analyzes the water users. And forest rapid assessment, we carry forest rapid assessment. The second component, we try to demonstrate the source to sea management approach by piloting within the basin some small projects, such as improved diet by having on fish consumption, by having aquaculture, and or co-management on coastal lagoon, or improving knowledge on integrated sustainable land management practices, SLM. And the third element is to enable and condition with the government, to agree with the government on a strategic action plan and how we can scale up our action for a better improvement within the source to sea, up to the sea, like from the upper catchment up to the sea. One of the most recent project in FAO, which focusing on the SDGs, is the GME project. And GME project is a multi-agency initiative. FAO, UN Habitat, UNEP, UNESCO, UNEP, UNICEF, WHO, WMO. The GME project aims to provide support to countries in a process of monitoring of SDG 6 and its related indicator. That it is through technical capacity and tools. They have pilot country in the phase 1, which were Senegal, Peru, Uganda, Jordan, and Netherlands. Now we are in the second phase, which includes 60 countries. The GME project, FAO is a custody for indicator 2.6 for two indicators, 6.4.1 and 6.4.2. This is through carry out. We are as a custody agency. We try to build the capacity within the countries through carrying out 4 webinars with 3 languages, English, French, and Spanish, and 3 physical workshops that will be carried in Guatemala, Morocco, and Rome, and provide e-learning for each indicator, e-learning courses. The
2 minutes, please, Amani.
Okay. Fish plays an important role in fighting hunger and malnutrition. Fish is not only source of a protein, healthy fat, but also a unique source of essential nutrition, including long chains of omega fatty acid, iodine, vitamin D. In many developing countries, fish is the main or only source of animal protein and is essential for providing micronutrient to vulnerable populations. Worldwide, more than 3.1 billion people depend on fish for at least 20% of their total animal protein intake, and further 1.3 billion people for 15% of animal protein intake. Fish consumption has increased 3 kg per capita from 1961 to approximately 20 kg per capita today. FAO conduct responsible fishery remains for SDG 14 more relevant than ever after 20 years of its approval. Through its 2 decades, the code principle has given rise to various instruments that seek to improve the conservation, management, and development of the fishery and aquaculture sector. We have a voluntary guide as example for fish, 40-state measure agreement, and catch document schema. To conclude, in this map, we have the FAO offices or the main sub-region and regional offices where we have land and water offices over the world. And we discussed in this presentation how to improve food security and nutrition through the source-to-sea approach. FAO has long history working on areas where we represent maybe not in a holistic approach like how we are trying to do now, but was more in a project within the area. Since the FAO established in 1945, and since that time we are working in water, agriculture, and fishery. SDG 6 and SDG 14 are fundamental towards a better understanding and trying to achieve sustainable management and utilization resource from source to sea. Much better integrated approach are involved from various stakeholders where it's needed to be involved. I can say that now we are more in designing phase, so we are designing project in Africa, South Africa, Southern Africa, one in Latin America, and a couple in Asia. And by this, I would like to ask also my colleague who contributed to this presentation, Ricardo and Joaquim. Thank you for it.
And many thank you to you as well, Amani. A quick question before we move on. Where can we find more information on FAO's work on land and water management? Is there something in particular that you could point us to in relation to source to sea? One particular knowledge product?
We have a website for land and water where we reflected the source to sea. Yet our designing proposal is not reflected there. I think one of the proposals in the last stage, so we are waiting a letter of the country to be clear, and then after we get the proposal, it will be in the website. But when we are designing, we are more open for partnering.
Great, many thanks for that, Amani. Chengzi, could I ask you to please pass the presentation over to me, and also to unmute Birgitte's microphone if you can, or Birgitte, if you can unmute yourself, and we could hear your thoughts on pulling things together. Do we have Birgitte?
I'm here. Yeah.
Great.
So thank you.
We can hear you.
Great. Yeah, so thank you for this. I'll be brief because I think we're already past 4, but well, as you know, there are a number of flows that connect our land rivers to our coastal and marine areas, not only the water and sediments flows that we have discussed here today, but also the flow of pollutants and biota like fish that Amani mentioned, and even materials. We are increasingly using land along rivers and coasts for construction and infrastructure development. Connecting this sort of to the Sustainable Development Goals, which is the overall theme of this webinar series. there we have a strong emphasis on water quality and on water-related and coastal ecosystems. But the importance of these flows that we have discussed here today, the water and sediment flows to coastal marine areas and to ecosystems, they are a bit invisible here in the SDG agenda. There's some reference to water for ecosystems in relation to targets of water use efficiency, but otherwise there's nothing on sediments, for example. And I think it's important to be aware of, because water and sediment flows are of course linked to land and forest management, like Amani was talking about, to infrastructure development, that Ole was talking about, the need for spatial planning, and that Sanne was talking about this in relation to the ports. And I think we need to consider this especially in relation to also to the SDG and climate targets on more sustainable energy productions now, and the plans for increased hydropower in many parts of the world, and the related risks for sediment trapping and the impacts that this can have on downstream coastal areas. Just to make a point for a bit more attention to the need for managing our sediments.
Yeah, many thanks for that, Birgitta. I think that was a good job done there, and I know that Sanne in particular will be very pleased to hear that you picked up on the issue of sediments and have seen that how it's generally been a weaker point in source to sea work. I'd like now to just quickly use the last few minutes we have to move over to some of the questions that have come in. Case, if you could unmute your microphone. We've had a question about whether your assessment is available online, and I think you already included reference to that in your presentation. So if you missed that, then there's a good chance to go back and revisit the recording and see Case's reference. But another question we have, Case, is, in your opinion, is climate change more evident in the coastal zone?
More evident? I can not exactly say so. What you do see in the coastal areas is that climate change becomes visible, and created climate change even more, from different angles. It's about slow onset processes like sea level rise, but it's also on the impact of more frequent storms and floods as a result. It's also coming from the other side, from cloudbursts inland in cities and river flows, which are impacted under climate change scenarios. So it comes from different sides. And thus,
right. So it's sorry, just to summarize. So it's as I understood it, it's not so much more that it's the impacts are particularly evident there than other places, but more that the climate change is more evident, more that the impacts are evident from the land and sea-based connections there. Okay, many thanks for that, Case. Ola, moving over to you.
Okay.
Hi, yes, we can hear you now. Could you say a few words on the value of ecosystem-based adaptation for source to sea? Where is it and what is it, please?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I would like to come back to Birgitta's good point, the linkages between SDG 14 and 13 and 6 indeed, because many of the issues we see downstream are really caused by upstream activities or lack of activities, lack of careful managing water resources, sediments, and so forth. So coastal adaptation or delta ecosystem adaptation would be a combination of very sort of localized coastal solutions, but indeed I think the whole thinking of source to sea and fixing some of the issues, reducing the downstream resilience, but fixing it upstream would be very useful. And to this end, also building on the SDG discussion, in our sort of marine coastal world, the key topic here is really We're talking about blue economy. But that's not only a downstream issue. Again, it's about how inaction upstream can be very costly downstream. So coastal adaptation, to come back to the question, is benefiting from a lot of upstream work, allowing the coastal ecosystems to do its adaptation services. I think it's a big question. I've just ended there. Hello.
Thank you, Ola. Sorry, I forgot to unmute my microphone there. Thanks, Ola. We could have discussed that one, I know, for a long while, but time is against us. Sanna, moving over to you. I hope you're still there.
Yes, Garrett, I'm still here.
Good to know. Two quick questions for you, because I missed you out before. I feel a little bad for that. The first question we have from one of the participants is there a particular paper or papers on this work on harbours and sediments that you could recommend? So is there, maybe if you could just recommend one in particular, if you're aware of one, or a book?
Yes, actually there is quite a good paper on port sedimentation for different sizes of ports. I can recommend. Then of course I don't remember the exact reference, but I'll be keen to share it if people will send me an email. There's also a good paper on this white sand, blue sand that I showed in one of the images, but please I'd recommend the person to send me an email. I'll be very happy to share.
The good news is we have their contact details already, yes. So we'll connect you there. Thanks, Sanna. And the next question for you, Sanna, please, is how can downstream erosion actually be avoided?
Traditionally, the issue of coastal erosion has been solved by hard structures, so stone structures, basically, where it can quite efficiently, if planned correctly, prevent erosion from the coast. The best solution is, of course, to see if you can avoid it. Like I showed you, maybe optimize your structures or work with your upstream effects to avoid it. Otherwise, in recent years, nourishment of sand, also feeding sand to the shorelines has been used widely, and this is a really good solution, since it's an overall solution which is not kind of exporting the problem downstream. So if you protect one section with stones, you risk having erosion on the next section of your coast, since you hold on to you prevent erosion from only one section but not the next section. The downside of nourishment is, of course, that you had to make available in the budget feeding of sand to the coast every year, which may be a challenge in some countries.
Many thanks for that, Sanna. Moving over to you, Amani. I hope you're still with us.
Yeah.
Amani, a question.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. How can we capture knowledge from the local level in terms of implementing the SDGs, and how can this knowledge be upscaled so it can be of use to others?
You mean about the GME project?
I think it's the question isn't specifically for that project, but in general. So I think you actually have some good examples of from your working experience of on-the-ground implementations, where there be good lessons learned. How can those be captured and disseminated?
So through our project, when there is a good action and a good result, we try to scale it up in other projects, and we try to reflect it, and we try to disseminate it through publication and through our conferences and through our meetings.
Okay, great. So that was the replication of good experiences, capturing it in knowledge products, and then spreading the good word through various meetings and various fora.
Yes. Yes.
Great, many thanks for that, Amani. To move on, I'm afraid that's all we have time for with the questions right now. For those that we didn't have time to cover, we're going to be liaising with the presenters to get you a response if they're able to. As mentioned, this is the third webinar in the series. The next one is entitled Financing Source to See Action, and we have that one scheduled for July the 5th at exactly the same time as today. While the registration isn't open for that one just yet, please feel free to pencil that one in your calendars already. If you have any burning additional questions or issues, please send an email to Jingzi and he'll either get back to you directly or share them with the presenters or myself for a response. Here is the link I've been promising a couple of times to the registration, as well as the recordings and presentations on the website. The video recordings, of course, link to YouTube. That's the place to find the earlier ones. We're going to have the one here today, hopefully a clean version with good audio up in a few days' time. We're always looking to improve the quality of our work, so we'd be very grateful if you could just use a couple of minutes to respond to the feedback survey form that we'll send you automatically when you close this webinar. So, you know, if you have any particular requests, more of one thing, less of another, different ideas for topics we could address in future series, this is the place to do it. Or, of course, if you have any complaints, constructive criticism is always welcome. Finally, please allow me to conclude today's session by thanking the participants, the presenters for taking the time to share their knowledge with us, and also the participants, and also to Jingzi for his back office support. And please allow me to wish you all a very good morning, a good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thanks. Bye.